Assalamualaikum everyone. We are live again with Let's Talk Mahol. Happy 2023 to everybody. Hopefully सबका नया साल अच्छा गुजरा है and hopefully everybody's new year's resolutions were about, climate action and improving the environment and improving the nature around them. And living a sustainable lifestyle. Today we have Dr. Imran Khalid Saab with us. He's director governance and policy at the Worldwide Fund, and he's an expert on climate action and several other, several topics within climate action. But today we'll be talking about water with him and the future of Pakistan's water systems with him. And of course, we have Dawar with us as well. Dawar, why don't you start off?
Thank you, Ahmad, and thank you, Dr. Imran, for joining us as well. This is, I think, about our seventh installment now, and we wanted to touch something that is very, very crucial to Pakistan and also in a way existential, which is the water system and specifically the Indus Basin system on which Pakistan is dependent and our neighbors are dependent. And of course, it has been in the focus of what we have seen in the past couple of months. In many cases, people have termed the floods catastrophe, a natural disaster, but in experts' opinions, it is also one of the biggest failures of water management itself, or how we manage the river system. So we wanted to start off there. That Dr. Saab, in your opinion, what is the best way to define a water system, or in Pakistan's context, what in specific we need to be looking at when we talk about Pakistan's water issues?
Gee, thank you so much, Ahmed and Dawar, for having me on. Congratulations on starting this initiative, and I look forward to participating in this. So, when we talk of water, and we talk of water security, and we talk of resilience, whose water security and whose resilience are we talking about, right? That's important. Is it of a person who's living in Dhokhasu, in right outside Islamabad, on the outskirts of Rawalpindi? Are we talking about somebody who's in Dera Ghazi Khan? Are we talking about somebody who's in Nasirabad? Are we talking about a person, who's right next to Malir and Malir River, a polluted river that's turned into, something that's we're totally ignoring. So the question is, when we talk of water security, whose water security are we talking about? Unfortunately, we've been approaching water through a very technocratic lens. We've been doing it through the prism of a select few experts, right? And those experts are perhaps engineers, they're perhaps so-called water managers, but their decision making thus far does not speak to the needs of the women, the child, or the elderly individuals in the communities that I've just mentioned, right? When we talk of water, in Pakistan, the discussion usually begins and ends with the discussion on dams, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But that's really problematic for me. It is not something that we talk about in terms of the household needs in these communities. 90% of our water goes towards agriculture. It is used to grow sugarcane. It is used to grow cotton, right? It is used to grow rice. Extremely water-intensive crops. If Pakistan is water stressed and then we're moving towards water scarcity each and every day, then why continue on this path? So there are a number of things that I think I can think about when it comes to water, but this is just the starting point. When we talk about water security, whose water security are we talking about?
You've mentioned, you touched on the concept of dams and water security. And this is something we wanted to sort of focus on as well, that we keep on hearing that Pakistan's water is running out. And in that is usually used as a reasoning to dam the rivers. That if we do not dam them, that Pakistan's water is going to run out. And I think at least over the past nearly 29 years of my life, I've been hearing this since kindergarten. I've been hearing it in various forms. It used to be initially that, oh, clean drinking water has run out, so you have to boil the water. Then eventually it became that you need to get those disposable water bottles. You need to subscribe to a water service as well. This was just in the cities. But at the same time, what does it mean that Pakistan's water is running out? And is it true that it is really running out? Should we be really scared, or the this is an equation that we have not been told correctly?
Yeah, so for this we need to understand the hydrological cycle. जब तक कि आप हाइड्रोलॉजिकल साइकिल को नहीं समझेंगे आप इस पे नहीं बात कर सकते, वरना तो आपको यही लगेगा कि जी हम हमारा पानी समंदर में जा रहा है और बस ज़्यादा हो रहा है। हाइड्रोलॉजिकल साइकिल ये है कि जी किस तरीके से पानी जो है इट्स पार्ट ऑफ द सिस्टम, द ग्लोबल सिस्टम, एंड इट जस्ट इवेपोरेशन होती है, वो जाके एटमॉस्फेयर में बादल बनते हैं, इट कम्स बैक डाउन। पाकिस्तान के अंदर तकरीबन 140 मिलियन एकड़ फीट का पानी आ रहा होता है, एंड इट्स बीन दैट वे initially in West Pakistan and even right now. Given the climate crisis, we're going to see more and more water coming through the system, and that's primarily through glacial melting, right? So Pakistan is located in something called the third pole. This is the largest conglomeration of glaciers outside the poles, and here what's important to understand is that these glaciers every summer they melt a little bit, and that's where the waters come into the Indus, and that's what we use for our agriculture and for our food security. But with the passage of climate change, we're going to see these glaciers melt at a really fast rate, and when that's going to happen, that's going to virtually eliminate the glaciers. So let's say that if you're going to get to 3 degrees of warming by the end of the 21st century, that's going to be catastrophic for a country like Pakistan, because our glaciers, the glacial mass will, most probably be highly depleted as we move forward. So that's when we'll really need to start to talk of water scarcity. At this time, the water in the system is adequate enough for our needs. It's perhaps about the same as it was when we gained independence from the British. The issue is not availability of water per se. It's the equitable distribution of water to all those who need it. It's equitable distribution of water when it comes to agriculture. It's equitable distribution of water when it comes to your cities. So if you're growing sugarcane and you're growing rice, and these are highly water intensive crops. Are we accounting for our water needs and addressing them in a way that water is used in a sustainable manner in agriculture? How about our cities? In our urban areas, we've got people who regularly, have, 3 or 4 cars in their homes. They're washed. They've got large lawns. Then they go out and play golf, and any of the 3 or 4 golf courses, if you're here in Islamabad or Pindi, for example. And then you've got individuals such as those who are living in Farashtown or Jamestown, where we're working, and these are disadvantaged communities where people stand in long queues waiting for water tankers from the Capital Development Authority, or travel long distances to get even a couple of liters of safe drinking water. So again, the question of justice comes to my mind. When we talk about justice, we talk about environment justice, we talk about climate justice. That has to do with that's really linked with the human needs, and that's where water justice comes in as well. We like to talk big picture. We like to talk about transboundary waters and whether a neighbor that's larger than us is building more dams than us, and how that's impacting us. But that's not the issue. The issue is, what are you doing with the water that is available to you? And what I like to say is that, if you have a leaky bucket, you fix that bucket first, and then talk about adding more buckets. If you've got a leaky bucket, no matter how much water you're going to have, whether it's in the shape of dam or any other storage, it's that leak is the governance issue, right? That's lack of coordination. We're not talking to each other. We are not making decisions that are in line with the needs of the communities and the people, and that's where the gaps are.
Acha, speaking of leaky bucket, sorry, like Dawar just wanted to carry on with this question. Speaking of a leaky bucket, Dawar talked about availability of water, right? Like the water coming in. I wanted to ask similar question, but like probably framed a bit differently. कि हम लोग ये कहते हैं कि जी सारा पानी समंदर में जा रहा है या तो हम लोग जाया हो रहा है. So what's the definition of पानी जाया होना? आपने ऑफ कोर्स गोल्फ कोर्सेज का तो नाम लिया, वो तो नहीं कहते हैं चले, वो ये कि लोग अपने उसमें वो क्लाइमेट जस्टिस वाली बात आ जाती है कि पीने के लिए पानी नहीं है, तो उसमें जो ये पीने के लिए साफ पानी नहीं है, मगर गोल्फ कोर्स में पानी जा रहा है. मगर क्या समंदर में पानी जाना जाया होना ही है? क्योंकि लाइक अदरवाइज द क्वेश्चन अराइजेस अबाउट अगर पानी कम जा रहा है समंदर में तो अबाउट सी वाटर इंट्रूजन एज वेल एंड लाइक अदर इश्यूज दैट आर caused by less water going into the oceans. वो क्या जाया होता है पानी?
हाँ, नहीं, जब पानी आपका समंदर में जा रहा है तो that is part of something called the environmental flows. That is something necessary for the ecosystem to maintain its health. Constant supply of water through the natural terrain replenishes the system. It helps it flourish. अगर आप इंडस डेल्टा की ही बात कर लें तो because dams बने, उससे पहले barrages बने, and this dates back to the days of the British. What's happened now is that the waters that used to flow at one particular point right down to the coast, right below Kotri, आपके पास ठीक ठाक पानी जा रहा होता था. That's stopped because आप पानी को ऊपर स्टोर कर लेते हैं. And when you do that, your mangrove forests, for example, which require a certain amount of fresh water as well as saline water to flourish, वो नहीं हो रहा है. आपके मैंग्रोव फॉरेस्ट डिस्टर्ब हो रहे हैं, आपकी फिशरीज इंपैक्ट कर रही हैं, आपकी सेडिमेंटेशन लोड होता है जो कि आपका साथ साथ आता है विद द रिवर, it brings in topsoil. That's been disturbed. ऊपर से पानी जब आपका नहीं आ रहा तो sea water inundation भी होती है. Sea water inundation, now that's picking up speed now because of sea level rise due to climate change. So we were seeing that happen as well. But the primary reason is lack of water that's flowing through the system. So water going into the sea is not wasted. In fact, it's necessary. It's important. We have something called the Indus Apportionment Accord of 1991. It talks about 10 million acre feet of water that's supposed to go below Kotri to the river on an annual basis. Now, we can talk about whether that's the right figure when it comes to environmental flows, but there is this recognition even amongst the decision makers that environmental flows are essential. Yet, this is only as far as the paperwork is concerned. We talk about averages. So when during the flood season, more water does go down below Kotri, and in other years it does not. And so when you talk to some experts, they say, look, on the average we are meeting the 10 million acre feet or whatever, but that's not sufficient. We need to have a sustainable supply of water that's going to the delta regularly, and that has been stopped due to the massive amount of development that's taken place in the Indus Basin. And then let me just also add that not only in Pakistan, but also on the Eastern Front. So after the Indus Waters Treaty, when we gave away under the treaty the three eastern rivers, Ravi, Sutlej, and Beas to India, that essentially stopped any kind of regular flow coming into Pakistan. And what we see is more water does come in, but that's only during flood seasons from the east. Other than that, you've got Ravi or Hodyara. These are essentially wastewater drains, bringing in municipal, industrial, agricultural waste, adding to some of our own doings.
I wanted to touch on because we've already talked about river flows. The groundwater system that we have is largely linked to what is in the entire water system as well, combined with the rivers and the monsoon systems. So, is the 140 million acre feet figure accounting for the groundwater system, or is this, or we don't have a good estimate of the groundwater system? Because that in itself is probably bigger than whatever capacity we have. And in terms of managing groundwater system, where do we stand, and what could be done to make more effective use of it?
Yeah, so that figure does not account for the groundwater, and groundwater it does contribute to groundwater, right? So when you have, for example, when we talk about canal lining, what that essentially doing is it is facilitating the supply of water to the farmer, but at the same time, when you line those canals, you're essentially inhibiting the groundwater recharge. And this does play a major role in terms of our groundwater recharge. But groundwater depletion is a fact. We are seeing that happen not only in urban areas but also in rural areas, and not only in Pakistan but across South Asia and even in India. We've got over 1 million, tube wells in the Punjab, which are contributing to this. Groundwater acquisition and the way we've done it in Balochistan has destroyed the Kares system, which was the historical way of doing things, ensuring that they had a resilient supply of water. So what we're seeing right now is that groundwater, which to me is like a bank account, right, for rainy days. It's something that you can rely on come the hard times. And unfortunately, we haven't had the laws, or even now that we are beginning to have the laws, but very little implementation in terms of ensuring that the groundwater levels remain the same. And we are seeing this in the cities as well as in rural areas.
That makes sense. And I was actually interested in particularly in groundwater because one of the figures that I've heard in various reports, and probably also in terms of post flood management and everything, is that a lot of water that came through these rain induced floods will eventually only be cleared if the groundwater system was effective. And one of the solutions that has been presented was that perhaps having reservoirs in place, smaller reservoirs, not large dams in multiple places, would have helped. Uh, would you like to comment on it, that in case we have much more water in the system, a lot more rains as weather patterns get erratic, what could be a good solution to manage the excessive inflow of water just through monsoon rains?
Yeah, so when we talk of dams, I do like to talk about storages more than that, and groundwater is a storage system, and then small reservoirs play a similar role. It depends on the geography and the topography of a particular locale, but I agree with you that if we have a nature-based ideation in this regard, a green infrastructural approach, if you may, then perhaps we would see much less losses in case of future events. But for that, we really need to go down to the different sites and really study them. One of the things that WWF has been working on is called something called the Recharge Pakistan program, whereby we're trying to replenish and redevelop some of the historical wetlands that have gone dry, and utilize nature-based solutions to not only ameliorate the large amounts of water that come in when it floods, but also to allow groundwater to recharge in such a way so that it can serve as a storage. And this is a project that we've been working on with the Green Climate Fund, and it's just been submitted, and hopefully we'll get the funding necessary to start that. And this is happening around Manchar and other areas that have just in fact been flooded. So once this project is on the ground, hopefully within the next 4 to 5 years, we'll begin to see the results, and some of the questions that you have in regard to this will surely be answered.
That sounds like great news. Actually, perfect for something that probably Manchar and the other wetlands need in Pakistan as well. Regarding Manchar, I think just like hearing about it, I visited the lake in 2017. And interestingly, at that point in time, one of the biggest complaints of the fishermen was that not only has the water receded, but after it has receded at that point, it was highly polluted, and it was just municipal waste from the small villages and towns being dumped into it while the water was receding. So a lot of the fishing activity had to be stopped because, of course, there were no healthy fish to do the regular fishing that they were used to. That is becoming a very, very big issue in Pakistan in general. I think we're very frequently hear about our air pollution issues, but river pollution, pollutions in our lakes, not just plastic, but in terms of really, really very, very damaging public health related infections and diseases is very common. Uh, what what is the sort of situation if we talk about rivers and lakes? Uh, do you think that we have, of course, we don't have clean drinking water available, but one of the things that was pointed out that Ravi, for example, is one of the dirtiest. I think it was either number one or number two, probably number one when it came to river water quality. Uh, how did we get here, and what can we do possibly to get out of the situation that we cannot provide clean air, we cannot provide clean water? How do we expect any sort of growth among our human capital? It can't be just like send kids to school. They still need a very healthy environment to thrive. So where do we stand, and what can we do to really get through this?
Yeah, no, this is a good question, Dawar, and I, I I really do. I really think that the way we make our decisions, the technocratic nature of these decisions does not count for the communities that you just mentioned. So the Mohanna, the community that lives on Manchar Lake, ask them whether they were ever somebody's even come to them and ask them. I'm not talking about researchers who might have gone there, but I'm talking about decision makers and whether they've ever been part of a consultation process. Uh, we like to talk about environmental impact assessments, but rather than being a tool for a bigger end, they've become an end unto themselves, as I like to say. That is to say that this is all khanapuri. कि यार ठीक है हमने एक और check box कर दिया, अब now we can move on to something else. And so all of the things that you just mentioned, these are environmental issues. 83 में environmental protection ordinance आता है पाकिस्तान का, और उस वक्त ordinance इसलिए था क्योंकि ज़िया की government थी. It was a military rule. We didn't have the parliament to turn it into an act, but in 97 we get the act. By 1999 we've got national environmental quality standards, right? We've got the environmental protection agencies that are in business since the 80s as well. So it's not like we don't know what we're talking about. We've got essentially a framework for action, which talks about ensuring कि जी अगर आपकी pollution levels हैं वो इतने होने चाहिए, industry से pollution है वो आपकी इतनी restrict होनी चाहिए, waste water treatment plants होने चाहिए, waste नहीं होना चाहिए, you cannot burn waste, you cannot throw it into the natural streams, so on and so forth. But that continues to happen. इस वक्त less than 1% of municipal wastewater is treated. Think about that. All of it goes into open drains, natural streams, rivers. The industry where they've got some plants, a treatment plant, it's good and well, but majority do not. And that wastewater ends up polluting your waterways and groundwater, right? Uh, I cannot see you guys, so I'm not really sure whether you're still there. So if I can, okay, there you are. So this is good. um, so think about the tanneries that we have, right?
We just want everybody to focus on you. We're right here.
Well, I see myself. It's like I'm looking at the mirror and I'm staring back at myself, and you know. Anyways,
Right.
so tanneries की बात कर ले, right? Sialkot में tanneries हैं. Where is that wastewater going? Uh, Without treatment, it's you're going to dump it out in the open land or your water bodies. Eventually, it's going to find its way into the groundwater, and when it does, it's going to mix in with the water supplies that people have because we do not have municipal water supplies. उस तरह के pipelines नहीं हैं, so people mostly rely on groundwater. And there are no checks as to the quality of the groundwater, and that's what we are drinking, right? So as to your question, Dawar, I think we really need to rethink our development trajectory. Development, but for whom, right?
Exactly.
If it, yeah, and unless and until we have this vision, we'll continue to see these regular episodes of air pollution, and we will call it the fifth season of smog, and we'll continue to see these waste dumps in our cities. We'll continue to see polluted water, and people like me who can afford a bottled water or a air filtration unit, or can get away from the pollution, will do so because I'm living in my own bubble. In fact, anyone who's here, who's listening to me, क्योंकि हम लोग अंग्रेजी में बात कर रहे हैं, उर्दू में कर भी नहीं रहे. So that's sort of people who are really being affected. Unfortunately, do not even have the time to join these discussions because उनके 10,000 किस्म के और मसले हैं और वो नहीं हो सकता. So there's a huge dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots here, and unfortunately, our development trajectory and our policy mechanisms have facilitated that.
बिल्कुल अच्छा. Like I just wanted to I think it's pertinent to mention over here क्योंकि आपने जैसे sewage water की भी बात की कि just yesterday, उससे पहले भी हम लोग जो पकड़ चुके हैं एक दो दफा, just yesterday a couple friends of mine, they saw water tankers dumping raw sewage or grey water या जो भी raw sewage आप उसको कह लें into the ocean on Karachi beach. और फिर वो जो उनसे पूछा कि भाई आप कैसे कर रहे हैं, किसकी इजाजत से कर रहे हैं, तो उन्होंने कहा कि जी हम डीएचए की इजाजत से कर रहे हैं. तो द हैव्स एंड हैव नॉट्स वाली बात बिल्कुल ठीक है. और मगर मजे की बात ये, समंदर के अंदर एक दफा पानी चला गया और रॉ सूएज चला गया तो वो तो फिर वो हैव्स और हैव नॉट्स बराबर हो जाएंगे. बराबर में एमआर है, बराबर में जो कहते हैं हमारी आवाम है जो कि समंदर पे आती है नहाने के लिए. तो लेकिन को the thing that they need to understand, of course, is कि in the end all of us are being impacted. So I completely agree with you. So, but what's the deal with sewage? Finances वगैरह की कमी है. Why are we not able to treat it properly? What do you think the issue is, and does WWF have an opinion on this? Have you advised entities like KWNSB, etc.?
I actually want to add an interesting tidbit because Imran Sahab mentioned tanneries and you mentioned sewage. I was working on this project in Kasur, and Kasur also has this chunk of tanneries. And the issue with those tanneries is that much like Sialkot and also in Kanpur in India, these tanneries clusters were built here by some incentivization in the 1940s, 1930s and 40s, when the Goras required leather for some activity. So these families living in these towns started building tanneries, and these were like old mohallas. And those mohallas are now supposed to be residential areas. But those mohallas have these small, warehousing where this tanning operation happens. And Kasur, incidentally, also has a treatment plant. So they have an authority called KTWMA, Kasur Tanneries Waste Management Authority. The plant that they have, they like it's very basic, primary level treatment, and they've created these large beds for the pollution to settle and the water to get flooded into the agricultural fields. Then those 8 ponds, large ponds, were completely silted. This was last year. It was completely silted all the way till up till their mouths. So those ponds don't work anymore. The other thing was that the rates set for treatment, they will have to charge the tanneries that this amount of water is coming through the canal, which is coming from the industrial sites, was set in 2001 during the martial law regime. That was set at 5 rupees per, I think, unit or something. And currently, the requirement was something like 21 rupees per unit for treatment. And since those units have not been revised, the Waste Management Authority is basically bankrupt. And whenever they increase the rates, the owners of tanneries basically refuse to, pay those rates. Then they sent the environmental inspectors to lock them up, and the tannery owners basically broke the locks and started operating tanneries again. And there's like just a couple of 3, 4 environmental inspectors for the entire district, one assistant director from EPA, who sits in the DC office. He doesn't have much authority, and these guys are like local tannery owners were conglomerated, and they were working with one focus that we just have to keep operating. So it's like you have this situation where we have given the waste management operation, or have made it into such a low end sort of management system that they cannot recover the costs. The facility eventually has become ran into bankruptcy, doesn't have the money to really revamp itself. And of course, now what is happening is that they also then send all the polluted water into the Ravi River. So that is just like one city, and I'm sure Imran Sahab can add to this. Must be the situation in other cities as well.
I think what you've just talked about is a reflection of the state of affairs uh, across Pakistan. But at least in this case, they had a system in place, और वो नहीं हो रहा. बाकी जगहों पे तो system ही नहीं है आपके पास. We talk about combined effluent treatment plants. It's just not there. It's a very एक तरह से very basic सी चीज है. आपने अपने waste को treat करना है. It's just not. It's not happening. But very quickly, when the floods came and जब मंचर का हुआ तो I was thinking that this is going to be good for the मोहल्ला. I mean, very silver lining. बहुत ज़्यादा नुकसान हुआ, लेकिन वो silver lining ये है कि आपके जब सैलाब आता है तो it's going to take away the pollution and the waste, and then it's going to take it down and dump it to the sea. ठीक है. It's going to bring in topsoil. So मोहल्ला के लिए बेहतर था. It was better for the people in the delta because वो topsoil आती है. आपकी अभी से हमें पता लग रहा है कि the fish has returned, and the fisher community is doing well after the floods. But why do we have to wait for these forces of nature to act, in order to make some communities feel better? And then, in fact, that's not happening because हमारी development trajectory इस किस्म की है. So wastewater, yes. So there's this industrial aspect जो कि आपने करना है. Not rocket science. You should be able to do it. अगर आप industry हैं, if you're making enough money, first of all, I think if you're operating and you're operating within the laws, I mean, you have to register yourself. You're supposed to pay taxes. Environmental issues and environmental cognizance should be part and parcel of that. And if you're not meeting the national environmental quality standard, you should no longer stay open. But a lot of these entities are empowered by political entities, and the Environmental Protection Agency, Environmental Protection Department, they're not powerful enough and not equipped enough. They do not have the capacity to go after some of the larger polluters. So that's the industrial side of things. You have the municipalities who have to address wastewater. So it has to be done by the CDA here in Islamabad, the Rawalpindi Development Authority, and LDA, etc., WASAs. But that's not happening. Because we can get away with it, right? So nobody's ever asked them, look, Why is the waste being burned? Because there's virtually no technical landfills in Pakistan, no treatment plants. Because when we develop our cities, we forget about, we focus solely on infrastructure and focus solely on the economic well-being or the finances that come in, rather than post-facto situation. And that's quite tragic, because this isn't rocket science. I mean, this is something that we should be able to do on our own. We do not need to call an international conference to address our solid waste or municipal wastewater needs. And then one thing that we haven't talked about yet is wastewater that emanates out of our rural communities, right? So you have a lot of these communities that perhaps need to have a septic tank in place whereby the waste is settled, and it serves to treat the wastewater. And there was a few years back a study by World Bank that showed that the groundwater supplies were being contaminated by toilets or which were right next to it. So you have the wastewater that seeps into the ground. Now you're drinking it, and that's leading to stunting. And virtually 1 in 3 children in Pakistan are stunted because of poor wash conditions. Something that we ignore quite a lot when we talk of water, but this is a serious and a grave issue that needs redressal.
I think probably let's move to
Right.
winding. But I have one last question.
So I guess
and I think I will have one last question, then we can probably wind up. And we've touched on, you've mentioned that we don't need to have
Exactly.
conferences on water management, and the conference that the government's organized right now is, they're dubbing it, they're like marketing it in a way that this was a catastrophe from a nature-induced flood or natural disaster, and we're not really sure how much of it was a disaster, how much it was definitely a climate anomaly, but in many cases it was also a failure of forecasting. It was also a failure of dam management, because there was no need to fill up the dams in advance. So how do you think is our narrative really following reality, or are we really not seeing the true picture and using it for short-term gains?
Yeah, we've been working on something called the Climate Crisis Charter right after the floods happened, and it's on our website at WWF. And it does talk about climate change and its genesis, and that speaks to the greenhouse gas emissions that are emanating from the United States, Europe, Australia, Canada, so on and so forth. And it talks about climate justice and talks about loss and damage in the framework of climate negotiations. I think that's important. It's important to understand that, because it is having an impact across the world, and it's having an impact on Pakistan as well. There's enough evidence out there, right? So right before the flood, we had a prolonged heat wave. I've never, this is something that I've never experienced. And we've had droughts, and we see dengue fever across the northern part of Pakistan. I mean, something unheard of, and primarily due to climate change, glacial lake outbursts, floods, and so on and so forth. Having said that, we need to understand that yes, climate change is happening. It's going to impact us, but we have our own governance issues that need redressal. And these governance issues are not being spoken of, right? The rain forecast, I think Dawar and I have spoken about this, in Sindh and Balochistan was off by a factor of 10, right? We had 500 to 700% more rainfall in Balochistan and Sindh, and the forecast was for about 50% more. This is not due to lack of understanding or what needed to be done. Post 2010, there was an assessment done in which we decided that the Met department needed strengthening, and that this particular area, the Balochistan and Sindh, needed particular focus, and we needed to buy the necessary radars. And Monies were set aside, but it did not pan out as expected. So, this is something that's in the National Flood Protection Plan 4, right? It's there. But why is it that we were not able to translate some of the suggestions or the recommendations that came out of earlier extreme events? And that's a governance issue. We lack local government system. Having a local government system in place would have been very helpful in terms of responding initially to the floods and then ensuring that the response was sustainable. The lack of coordination, right, between the federal government and the provincial government. The current when you talk of the district disaster management authority is led by a deputy commissioner, DCO, who moves out when he's transferred. That needs to be, in my opinion, my personal opinion, it needs to be within the ambit of the local government system, because unless and until you do that, there will be no ownership. Involvement of communities when it comes to ensuring that how development takes place. Our roads and bridges and railway structures, they're built higher than the communities around them. And when it rains and when the waters come in, they serve to store that water. It's counterintuitive as to what we've done, because then we essentially restricted the natural drainage to take its course. So a lot of these things are there, and they're all governance issues that can be addressed locally. Even as we call out the global north for their misses and their lack of focus on addressing the greenhouse gas emissions, and then we should do that. But I think we also need to talk about our internal governance issues, and unfortunately we haven't been talking about them a lot.
Bilkul. Thank you, Imran Khalid sab, for your insight. We've actually gone like up to about 47 minutes. This is one of our more detailed podcasts, and बल्कि ये तो बहुत ही यानी छोटा टाइम था, बहुत कम टाइम था. अभी इस मुद्दे पे, इस टॉपिक के ऊपर तो बहुत लंबी of course बात हो सकती है. And thank you for taking time out and enlightening us on what's being done, what the issues are with with Pakistan's water systems. And I don't know, like, if people can see hope from from this conversation for the future of Pakistan's water systems. But as long as the conversation is going on, hopefully जो है कहते चीजें बेहतर होंगी. Thank you so much once again, and please do subscribe, and please do like and share the links and the environmental on Facebook and YouTube. Imran Khalid साहब, आप भी अपने audiences को बोलिएगा किस जगह से आके वो करें, क्योंकि we're hoping to have many more conversations. This was the first one in 2023. Hopefully we will have one every week for the entire year, and so on and so forth as well. Thank you so much once again, Dawar and Dr. Imran Khalid. We will see you inshallah next week with another topic and like another enlightened guest. Thank you.